Roosevelt, Astor, Forbes, Yale, Harvard. You think you know those names? Think again. These American aristocrats, these institutions that educate our leaders, were all built on one dark secret, a secret buried for 200 years. They all got rich the exact same way, by flooding China with opium, thousands of tons. Millions addicted, a brutal 400% profit. And then they spent the next 2 centuries ensuring you would never find out. Until now. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the president on Mount Rushmore, the man who saved America from the Great Depression. His family fortune came from selling drugs, hard drugs, opium, millions of addicts, millions dead, and the Roosevelts got rich. Very rich. And they were not alone. The Astors, the wealthiest family in America? Drug money. Forbes magazine was built on opium profits. Yale's Skull and Bones was funded by drug smugglers. Harvard's buildings were paid for with Chinese opium silver. Some of the most powerful families in American history, the institutions that educate our leaders, the dynasties that still run this country. All of it was built by poisoning an entire nation on an industrial scale. Thousands of tons, 400% profit margins. Then they buried the evidence, rewrote the history books, built libraries and museums with the blood money, and made sure you'd never find out. But the truth is undeniable. The shipping records exist, the letters survive, the account books are in the archives. And what they reveal is that America's aristocracy, the families we were taught to respect, made their fortunes doing exactly what we imprison. People for today, except they did it to an entire country. They poisoned millions, destroyed the Chinese economy, and got so rich they could erase their crimes from history. This is the story they don't want you to know, about the drug dealers who became American royalty and how they got away with it for 200 years. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the 32nd President of the United States, led America through the Great Depression and World War II. His face is on Mount Rushmore alongside Washington, Jefferson, and Lincoln, an American hero. But here's what they don't teach you in school. The fortune that funded FDR's privileged upbringing, his Harvard education, and his entry into politics, all of it came from drug money. His grandfather, Warren Delano II, made millions smuggling opium into China. Millions of Chinese became addicted, millions died, and the Delano family got very rich, and they weren't alone. The Astors, the richest family in America in the 1800s. Opium money. The Forbes family, yes, that Forbes, built their publishing empire on opium profits. The Perkins family funded Yale University with opium money. The Cabots, Boston Brahmins, were opium traders. The Russell family, opium smugglers, founded Skull and Bones at Yale. Some of the most powerful, most respected, most influential families in American history built their fortunes selling drugs. Not just participating. Dominating American companies controlled 10% of the opium trade into China by the 1830s. We're talking tons of opium, hundreds of millions of dollars, an entire generation of Chinese destroyed by addiction. And American families got so rich they founded universities, museums, and political dynasties that still run the country today. This is the story no one tells. How America's elite families made their fortunes in the opium trade, how they whitewashed that history, and how the same families who got rich selling drugs then spent a century criminalizing drugs for everyone else. The hypocrisy is staggering, and the proof is undeniable. To grasp the scale, you need to understand what the opium trade actually was, not the sanitized museum version. The reality, in the early 1800s, Britain had a problem. They were buying massive amounts of tea and silk from China, but China didn't want anything Britain produced, so Britain was paying in silver, draining their reserves. They needed something to sell to China. They found it: opium. Grown in British-controlled India, refined and smuggled into China, where it was illegal. The Chinese government had banned opium. They knew it was poison. But British and American traders didn't care. The profit margins were 400 to 500%. You could buy opium in India for $100, smuggle it into China, and sell it for $500 or $600. American families wanted in because American clipper ships were faster than British ships, perfect for outrunning Chinese naval patrols and delivering opium to secret coastal locations. American captains would sail to India, load up, wait offshore, and Chinese smugglers would row out in small boats, pay in silver. The American ships never technically entered Chinese ports, plausible deniability, and tons of silver flowed back to America. This went on for decades, and millions of Chinese became addicted. The Chinese economy was devastated, and in America, the families getting rich from this used the money to build legitimate empires. Let's look at the famous faces, starting with the Delanos. FDR's grandfather, Warren Delano II, was a partner in Russell and Company, the largest American opium trading firm in China. He ran the operation from 1833 to 1846, 13 years of opium smuggling. He returned to America a very wealthy man, rich enough to build a 40-room mansion. His daughter, Sarah Delano, married James Roosevelt. Their son was Franklin Delano Roosevelt. FDR grew up in wealth, all funded by opium money. Here's the kicker. In 1935, while FDR was president, he signed the first federal laws strictly controlling drugs. The man whose family fortune came from selling drugs to Chinese people spent his presidency criminalizing drugs for Americans. The irony is thick. The Astors. John Jacob Astor's wealth, which built the Waldorf Astoria and funded libraries, came from opium. His ships made regular opium runs, trading Turkish opium for Chinese silver. By 1840, Astor was worth $20 million, most of it from opium profits. The Forbes family. Yes, that Forbes. Robert Bennett Forbes and his brother John Murray Forbes were major opium traders, working with Russell and Company. John Forbes invested the profits into railroads and became one of the wealthiest men in Boston. Their descendants used that wealth to start Forbes magazine, the Perkins family. Thomas Handesid Perkins, one of the wealthiest men in New England, funded hospitals and schools. He made his money running opium from Turkey and India into China. Yale University's Perkins Fellowship is named after the family, funded by opium money. The Russell family. Samuel Russell founded Russell and Company. His cousin, William Huntington Russell, co-founded Skull and Bones at Yale in 1832. The most powerful secret society in America was built on Chinese opium money. This is the pattern. American families make enormous fortunes smuggling opium, return to America, invest in railroads and real estate, become respectable, fund universities and museums, and then erase the opium connection from their family histories. Their descendants become American aristocracy, and no one talks about where the money came from. Let's talk about what this opium did to China. By the 1830s, an estimated 10 to 12 million Chinese were addicted to opium. The addiction was so widespread it crippled the Chinese economy. The Chinese government tried to stop it, appointing Commissioner Lin Zexu, who destroyed 1,000 tons of British opium in 1839. Britain's response: war. The first opium. War. Britain won. Forced China to sign a treaty, open ports, and cede Hong Kong. The opium trade expanded. American firms benefited enormously because during the war, American firms like Russell and Company took over the British business. After the war, both British and American opium smuggling resumed at even higher levels. The human cost in China was catastrophic. Millions addicted, families destroyed, the economy wrecked. But in Boston and New York, American families were building mansions and founding universities. Here's the most infuriating part. The same families that made fortunes selling opium then turned around and criminalized drugs for everyone else. In the early 1900s, America led the international movement to ban opium. They pushed global drug prohibition. Why? Because by then, American elites had already made their money. They didn't want competition from opium dens opening in American cities, and they certainly didn't want anyone pointing out that their own fortunes came from the drug trade. So they criminalized it, painted opium users as criminals and degenerates, and buried the history of how their own families had mass-marketed the same drug to China. The hypocrisy is breathtaking, and here's what makes it even worse. The history has been whitewashed. Most Americans have no idea that the Delano, Astor, Forbes, Perkins, Russell, and Cabot families made their fortunes in opium. Go to the FDR Presidential Library, the Opium Connection is a small exhibit, downplayed as trade with China. Go to the Astor family history. It's all about furs and real estate. The opium is a footnote, if mentioned at all. The whitewashing has been systematic and thorough. These families used their wealth and influence to rewrite history. They donated to universities on the condition that certain facts were omitted. They made sure their descendants grew up never knowing the truth. But the evidence is undeniable. The shipping records, the letters, the account books, researchers have proven it. If the Delano family got rich selling drugs that destroyed millions of Chinese lives, how is FDR a hero? If Yale's Skull and Bones was funded by opium money, what does that say about American elite institutions? The truth stays buried, because the families that did it became so rich and powerful they could rewrite history. They could make sure their crimes were forgotten, and they could ensure their descendants lived in luxury, never confronting what their ancestors did. Let's be clear about the scale. Conservative estimates suggest American firms made $50 to $100 million from the China opium trade between 1800 and 1860, that's 1800s money. Adjusted for inflation, that's 1.5 to 3 billion in today's dollars just in profits. This was industrial-scale drug trafficking. Imagine if a group of American billionaires today were caught running a cartel that flooded Mexico with fentanyl. Millions died, and they used the profits to endow Harvard and fund political campaigns. That's what happened with the opium families. The Chinese remember. They call it the century of humiliation. They teach what was done to them. America forgets and whitewashes what we did. And the families that profited are happy to keep it that way. The Delano, Astor, Forbes, Perkins, Russell, Cabot, and Low families made their fortunes selling opium to China. Millions of Chinese were addicted and died. The Chinese economy was devastated. And American families got rich enough to found dynasties. The same families that made fortunes from drugs then criminalized drugs for everyone else. The hypocrisy is staggering. The truth is ugly, but it's the truth, and it's time people knew. The opium families got away with it for 200 years. But the truth doesn't stay hidden forever.